Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to combine shapes, movement, and musical notes to create interesting sound. This tutorial is inspired by this video right here from the Outgo Motion YouTube channel called Rotating Polygons on the Circle of Fifths, where a total of 10 regular polygons are rotating around a circle of fifths to produce musical sequences. I will link it down below so you can check it out. We will not be using these 12 notes as part of the circle of fifths, but instead we'll be using a total of 15 notes as part of a major scale. Why? Why not? So let's see if we can produce also surprising results. Let's start by figuring out how to upload the MP3 files onto the sketch. So if you're familiar with how we usually upload images or videos onto the sketch, this is going to be very similar. So first, we want to come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click Create Folder. I'm going to call this folder Assets. Then you want to come to this arrow here, click Upload File, and then this is where you're going to be dragging and dropping your MP3 files into. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of MP3 files, 15 to be exact. Then once your files are uploaded, how about we start by just preloading one MP3 file. I'm going to start by declaring a variable, let's call it asset, and I'm going to then use a function called preload. And this is going to allow us to preload the MP3 file onto the sketch before we running the program. All right, so we want to first set asset to a function called load sound. And then inside this parentheses here, we want to put in the location of the file that we want to preload. So let's start with just one MP3 file. How about this one, a1.mp3? So we need a quotation mark, then we need where it is, right? So assets \a1.mp3. Then let's click run. All right, so it works. So because the files are all in the same format of MP3, you can actually just do the way I just did it here. But in case that you have the same file name, let's say you have A1 in multiple formats, MP3, OGG, and things like that, what you can do is that you can delete the ending here, and then you can set sound formats, and then you can put in the different formats that you have. Let's say you have MP3 and you have OGG, and I click run, and it still works even though I don't actually have a file named A1 in the OGG format. But let's say I delete MP3 out and just leave OGG. It doesn't work because I don't actually have A1.ogg, but if I were to do MP3 here, it should work, and it did. But because I have all the files in the same format, I'm actually not going to use this function here, and then just put .mp3 here. And then how we're going to play this sound bites, what we need to do is that let's come to setup here. All we need to do is put in the name of the file, so asset, and then dot, and then play. That's it. It is as easy as that. Okay, so now how about we preload all of these files? So let's set an array called assets, and assets is going to be an array of all of these file names. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to set another array called sound, and then I'm going to use a for loop inside the preload function here. So for let I equal to 0, I less than the length of assets array, right? So we can just do assets dot length, then I plus plus. And then we're going to set the array sound at location of index I to the function load sounds. And we need to adjust this. So it's going to be assets \, and then plus. And then we want to get all of these names, right? So all we need to do is assets of I. Let's click run. Ooh, it doesn't work because right now we don't have this asset variable anymore. So we also want to copy and paste this for loop, and then how about we play all of the notes at the same time? Let's see how it sounds. Okay, I'm gonna stop hurting your ears for now. Now that we know how to load all the MP3 files, let's figure out how we want to visualize this. So I'm going to comment this out first. What I want to do is that I want to draw a bunch of circles in a shape of a big circle. So how about we start by using a for loop. And it's gonna loop through how long of a circle. So how about I set a variable called num, and I'm going to set num to be the length of actually the sound array. I want the number of circles to be the same number as the number of the nodes that I have. And then I++. And then now we need to set x and y coordinates, right? And to get an x and y coordinates, we need to use trigonometry based on a specific radius and angle. So let x to be equals to r times cosine of angle, and y to be equals to r times sine of angle. And how about we set r to be 150, and then we're going to actually figure out the angle in here. And because we want to space out the circles evenly on this big circle ring, what we can do is that we can just divide 360 by the number of circles that we want, and then we just multiply it by I. And because we are using the degrees mode, I need to also make sure that I change the angle mode to degrees. All right, and then we're going to draw ellipses at location x and y. Then how about I also set the radius for the circles as CR, and then let's set CR to be, let's do 10. Okay, let's click run. All right, so everything is based on this point here at 0, 0, right? So we want to move everything to the middle of the canvas, and we can do it in two ways. We can use a translate function, or we can just add however much we want to move to the right and down as part of this x and y coordinates here. So that's the way I'm gonna do it. All right, then now what I want to do is that I want to interact with these circles here such that when my mouse is on the x and y coordinates, I want to change the color of the circle to be a different color. So how can I do that? Let's set mx to be equals to mouse x and my to be equals to mouse y. And all we need to do is that we need to come to this for loop, right? And then just write a conditional statement that says if mx is equals to x and my is equals to y, then what I want to do is I want to fill it with, how about this nice pink color, and then else let's just fill it with white. Click run. Yay, it works. But as you can see here, it's kind of difficult to get the exact point where mx or mouse x equals to x and mouse y equals to y, because it's only a very specific pixel, right? An easier way to do it is that we add a bit of a buffer so that if I'm actually inside the circle here, it turns the color. So we just have to adjust this conditional statement a little bit. So how about I set the buffer to be CR, so the size of my circle radius here, and then it just says if mx is greater or equals to x minus buffer and mx is less than or equals to x plus buffer. Same thing for the y side, if my is greater than y minus buffer and my is less than or equals to y plus buffer. Then we change the colors. And there you go. It's much easier. But instead of just turning the colors, we want it to actually play some sound. But before we do that, I want to put this piece of code inside a class first, and then we can figure out the sound part. All right, so let's come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click create file. I'm going to call this file note.js. And then before we start writing the class, how about we go to index.html file, come to this line of code here, copy and paste, and then change the name here from sketch to whatever the new JavaScript file that you just created, in my case, note.js, and this is how you integrate a new JavaScript file into the program. Now we're ready. Let's go to note.js. All right, let's start with class. Let's call this class note, and then in the constructor function, we need what? This.x and then this.y, right? But actually we have that already calculated here. So let's just copy this. So this.x will be equals to width divided by 2 plus r times cosine of angle. So we also want to set r and angle as the parameters here. Same thing for y. And then how about we start writing the display method? What are we going to display? We are going to just display this ellipse here, right? At this.x, this.y, and then we also need to declare this.cr here. Let's set it to another parameter here, cr. And then I want to write a function called collision. And this is going to be this piece of code where we have this conditional statement. All right, so we're going to put in mx and my here. And then how about we put in buffer? And we can delete this for now. This will be this.x, this.x, this.y, and then this.y. And then instead of fill here, we want to return true when collided and return false when not collided. Okay, and then do we have anything else? We have this. Angle will be calculated after, so we can delete all of this for now. All right, I think we're ready to just create one note object. So how about we declare a variable called n, and then inside setup, I'm going to delete this actually. So n is going to be a new note object. And what do we need here? We need r, angle, and cr. Okay, r, angle, and cr. So we have r here at 150. Angle, I'm going to just create one note. So let's put 0. And then cr, we also have cr here as 10. And then let's do n dot display. Okay, so we have that. But right now, we are not calling collision anywhere. So how about we create another method called update. And then in here, we're going to call the collision method. And how we call a method inside a class, we just need to put the word this dot and then the name of the method here, right? And then we want to put in mx, my, and then cr. And then we need to put that same parameter inside the function here too. So mx, my, and cr. But what we want to do is that we want to check if this collision returns true, then we want to fill the color 255. Actually, why don't we set this .c to be that color? So this .c is going to be 255, 0, 200, and then else this .c will be just white, and then we can just use fill this .c here inside display, and then we want to also, how about declare this variable as 255 originally. And then now inside sketch.js, before the display function here, we also want to call update at what? Mouse X and mouse Y location and a buffer of CR. Run. Ta-da! Great. All right, so now instead of just one note, let's create 15 notes, right? So let's do notes as an array, and then num is still the same, so that's okay. How about I declare some of these as in put in the comment. So for this, let's call it sound assets, and then this is part of nodes variables. All right. And then what we want to do is inside setup, we want to call a for loop. And then inside here, we're going to put in nodes of I. And then instead of 0 here, this is where we're going to be calculating the angle, the same way that we did previously, right? So let angle to be equals to 360 divided by num, and then multiply by I to evenly spaced out the circles. And then we just need to copy this for loop here. And then we're going to call the update and the display methods on all of the nodes objects. Okay. And we get the same exact thing that we did before, but now it is part of object-oriented programming. Okay, so now we're ready to add some sound. Let's go back to node.js, and then how about we put in another parameter called note, and then we're going to set note to this note here, right? So once we have this, what we want to do inside update is that we want to play this note when it collides. Okay, and now we need to add this fourth argument, right? So we want to add what sound of I. Okay, let's try that. So as you can see here, it's the same note is played multiple times whenever the mouse is on the circle, right? And that is because that buffer is large. And you know, we can change this to 1, so it will reduce the number of when it collides, but it would not be a problem as much when we start using shapes. So how about we do that? So let's declare variable here. Let's call it shape variables. And I'm going to start by declaring x and y. And instead of doing a shape, I'm actually going to just do one ellipse. And this ellipse is going to be along this circular path. So inside draw here, x is going to be set to r times cosine of angle, a different angle. So let's call it starting angle. Then y is equals to r times sine of starting angle, right? And how about we set starting angle at 0. And then instead of mouse x and mouse y here, we want to check it when x and y collides with these nodes objects. So let's try it. Actually, before I do that, let's also draw an ellipse at x and y. Let's set a bigger size of 20 by 20. Actually, that's the same size. Ooh, so it's over here because I also need to move it out by width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. All right. So now what I want to do is that I want to set another variable called angle velocity. Let's set it to 1. And then we're going to, no, actually let's set it to 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to add it to the starting angle here, so that once we increment it by 1, then it moves the circle around the ring. All right, we're getting somewhere. Instead of just one circle, what if we do 3 nodes at the same time? Let's declare a variable called shape num, set it to 3. And so instead of just declaring x and y here, so we do not need this x and y anymore, because we're going to do a nested for loop. So we're going to say for let j equals to 0, j less than shape num, j plus plus, then these two functions will also be inside here. We're going to set x and y here to be equals to the same equations, but the starting angle will be different for each of the points. So starting angle will be what? It will be the same logic. So I want to space it out evenly so that it makes a triangle. So we're going to do 360 divided by shape num times I. And then I'm going to also delete this here. Okay. So we have this, and then we want to draw the ellipse. Actually, I already have it here. All right, I think that should be it. And now all of the x and y locations of all of the 3 points will be checked if it collides with the nodes or not. So So that actually produced something quite cool, but that's not actually what I wanted because it's not actually spaced out evenly if you look at it. And that is because I multiplied by I instead of j. All right, and then now you can play around with, how about we declare another variable called speed. Let's set it to 0.5, and then we can put in here speed, and if we were to increase it to, let's say, 7, and if we reverse it, and you can play with and if we do 15, so we play everything at the same time. Okay, so I like it the best when it's at 7 and at the forward speed. That sounds really cool. All right, so now that we figure out the sound part and how to visualize it, now let's make it pretty. So what I want to do is I want to, instead of drawing circles, I actually just want to use a function called vertex and draw out the shapes. So once we put vertex here, we need 2 additional functions, begin shape and end shape, to actually draw the shapes. So we're gonna put begin shape outside of this nested loop here, and then end shape. And we want to put enclosed in here so it closes the outline of the shape. So let's try that. Okay, that's good. All right, and then now inside the node.js class, what I want to do is I actually don't want to provide these colors here anymore for this .c, so we don't need it anymore. But then I want to do no fill, and I want to put the stroke color to be black, and then I want to actually set CR to be super small at 0.5. Okay, and then I want to draw ellipses of where the node collides with the shape. So what we can do is we can, in the middle of update and display here, says that if collided, then we want to draw the ellipse. So we just say if nodes of I.collision is true, then actually this is a little bit redundant because we have it in update already. So let's go back to node.js. So we can just put this dot collide as true, and then in else we're gonna say this dot collide is false. So I'm setting a Boolean variable that starts at false, and then now we just need to call this Boolean variable. So if it is false, if it's true, then I want to fill with a color of, how about red, and then else we fill it with white, and then we're gonna draw the ellipse at the location where it collides, right? Actually, I don't want to fill it with white. I want it to be no fill. I want it to only create the circles where the nodes hit the shapes. So we're gonna put it at X and Y, and then let's do a size of 30. Okay, let's try that. Okay, and then let's also do, how about no stroke? And because it hits so fast, you can barely see those colors. So I'm going to do a little bit of a trick where I put in the transparency for the background at 30. That looks better. So you can see a little bit of a blurring effect there. And then now I want it to change colors that is in the rainbow color shade. So I can do that by first set the color mode to HSB, and I want to provide a second argument to 255 to provide a range between 0 and 255. And then we're going to also set a variable called hue value, start at 0. So HSB stands for hue, saturation, and brightness, and we want to change the first argument, the hue value, over time. And so in here, we're gonna put hue value, and inside this draw function, we want to increment the hue value over time. So we want to set increment hue value by 1 at a time, but it is going to exceed 255. So we want to also set a conditional statement that says, if hue value is greater than 255, then return it back to 0. And that should be it. Let's run. Oh, what did I do wrong? It's not 0, 0 because we want to give saturation and brightness at 255, so at the highest value. Ta-da! All right, let's play around with these variables here. What if we do 4, 5, 8, So this should already gives you a lot of ideas of how to incorporate sounds and movement into something interesting. What if you also try to create sliders so that instead of having to change things here, you can actually just play around with different nice graphical user interface. I plan to do a few more of these type of tutorials, so if you like it and have any suggestions, please comment down below. So give this one a try.